Welcome to The Bridge, a podcast for dental professionals featuring the insights and expertise of fellow dental professionals. Let's welcome our host, Stephen Kuza.
Good morning and happy Friday to the Bridge Dental Podcast listeners out there. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Hardik Chodavadia out of Texas, Austin, Texas. Doc, thanks for joining us. How you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing great. It's early morning on Friday, so can't complain.
That's right. I'm on Eastern time. You're on Central time. I forgot about that. So it's like 7:12 over there. Well, we're going to get the best version of you, I'm sure. So we have the most energy in the morning, right?
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you joining us. And for the Bridge Dental Podcast listeners, I told you this season was going to be a lot of fun. We're going to run across the country, learn from a lot of dentists. You're going to love Dr. Hardik's story. He's going to talk about partnership. He's going to talk about family. He's going to talk about how to build 6 practices. So listen in, and hope you enjoy today's episode. So, Doc, let's kind of jump right in. Why don't you tell everybody, just so they know where you're at today, tell our Bridge podcast listeners where you're at today and kind of what your focus is right now.
Yeah, for sure. So, I'm a practicing dentist in Austin, Texas. We have a group called Enamels Dentistry. We have 6 practices in the Austin area, growing, trying to, and then, personally, dealing with the transition between, being a full-time practitioner and growing the business, being a leader in the business. That's kind of where we're at. So.
So we were talking prior to this. I mean, you graduated dental school in 2014?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then how quickly did you jump into practice ownership?
So our first practice we opened in, we say Cinco de Mayo was our first day. We had 0 patients, but we counted that as the first day. But it was May of 2016. We truly, me and my partner I started practice with Dr. Patel. We practiced for about a year in DFW in Dallas. And then moved down to Austin to build our practice. And, it took probably 6 months longer than we had anticipated, but pretty much a practice it ended up being 2 years before we opened up this practice. Our first one, at least.
Was that always in the plans when you were in dental school?
Yeah, I think so. For me, that was actually something in my personal statement when I applied to dental school was the thing that appealed to me. My dad was a business owner my growing up my whole life. So that was always something that I wanted to do, in the independence and that kind of stuff. I'm not like the best employee probably. So that was another thing where I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to constantly get in trouble. So I probably should just, do my own thing. So at least I have to hold myself accountable, which is a little bit easier to swallow for myself.
Right. Right. No, that's fair. That's fair, especially if you worked with your dad in the past or whatever, just learning that method, you knew how to keep yourself accountable. So, right. It's kind of wired into you.
Yeah, for sure.
So let's take a step back. When did you first kind of understand that dentistry was going to be a path you were going to take? So
honestly, later than a lot of people, in undergrad. Right. So, I initially went to undergrad as an engineer.
Okay.
And I quickly realized I'm good at math, but I don't enjoy doing it, which, if you want to become an engineer, it's a bit of a problem.
Yeah. So,
I kind of bounced back and forth between different things. I always had an interest in science, and, that's what drew me to engineering. So I took my hand at research science and stuff like that for about a year. And it was to me, the most boring thing I could ever do. So you're not interacting with any human beings. I'm pipetting things back and forth. I have no idea if it's working or not. And I was honestly pretty bad at it too. We did one experiment for 8 months. I could not get it right once. So I'm I feel like it's probably not the right thing to do. And then, naturally, my entire life, my dad has been telling me to become a doctor, like a physician. Right. Yeah. And then, so I was like, yeah, maybe I'll go to med school. And then, so I did everything. I took the MCATs and all that stuff. And my cousin actually, she's a nephrologist now, but I remember she called me and she's like, so why do you want to become a doctor? I'm like, yeah, it seems kind of cool. And she's like, that's probably not a great reason. You got to think about it a little bit more. So for me, I thought about hey, if I go to medical school, what do I want to do? And I was like, well, I'm a very my patients think I have ADD. So I need to be actively doing something. So that's why, in my mind, like surgery would have been the way to go for me in medicine, at least. And, the more I thought about it, it's like, okay, that's 4 years med school, 5 years residency plus fellowship. That's like, a 10 plus year commitment for something I'm not like 100% on. Like, I'm like, I think it would be cool. Not like this is my life's calling.
Right.
And it just seemed like, naturally, like I would have gone down that path, if I hadn't thought of an alternative. And my roommate at the time was applying to dental school. And I was like, oh, I literally never thought about this. Like, it didn't cross my mind even, like, not that I didn't want to do it, just didn't even present itself as an option to me. So luckily my dad's cousin is a dentist out in North Carolina. So I would stay with him over the summer for like a month, went to work with him every day. And there's like so many things related to dentistry. I'm like, this checks all the boxes of things that I like, there's a lot of innovation in technology. You can be your own, business owner, you can have your own practice. You're still dealing with like the health, science and healthcare and that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
And the biggest thing is you're interacting with people constantly, right? Which is exhausting in and of itself. But, that's something that I realize that I can't do without.
But you seem like a natural in that. And by the way, that sounds like, I mean, you like skipped over some hilarious things here. You took the MCAT, you just ran right through that, by the way. You're like, I was going to be an engineer, then a doctor, no, surgery, no, surgeon. It was so funny. You probably could have checked all those boxes, but that's cool. So you took a step back from that and you're like, well, what's going to be what should I actually spend my time in something I'm passionate about? And dentistry seemed to qualify science, time with people, the innovation, healthcare. Yeah. So it seemed to check all those boxes. Is that
for sure. Yeah, okay. For sure. And it was it was like the end of my junior year, right? So I'm like, I got to figure out what I want to do because my degree that I got is not particularly useful. So.
Oh man, that you take me back to college days. I remember I had a meeting with the teacher. I'm like, hey, I think I need to retake your class. She's like, why don't you just go get your degree? So just got to get through it sometimes. All right. So you graduated. Where did you go to dental school?
I went to dental school in San Antonio. So It was called University of Texas Health Science Center, San Antonio. Yeah. Way too long of a name. So they shortened it to UT Health San Antonio now. But that's after I left. But so I went to dental school down here in Texas in San Antonio.
Tell us about that experience. What was that like?
It was like at the same time, like probably one of the hardest things I've ever done. But also like one of the most rewarding things. I will say for sure, like intellectually by far the most challenging thing, the workload, all that kind of stuff, and just like pushed you in ways that like I had never pushed myself before. Yeah. But at the same time, like when I say it was like one of the most rewarding things is like, some of my best friendships, the people that I am the closest to in my life are my classmates from dental. So my partner in my practice is my classmate from dental school. And, I met my wife through him in dental school too. Right. So, a lot of big life stuff. And like, like I said, one of the most rewarding times, but if someone asked me that if I like wanted to keep becoming a dentist, I had to go back to school. I don't know if I'd do it again.
Oh man, I don't know. You would probably take a complete left turn and all of a sudden, take up, you would probably go be a surgeon again. I mean, your history is like, I'm just going to go try the next hardest thing. Well, all right. So that's kind of cool. When we grow up, a lot of times people will say, it's like, you're so much like your father. You're so much like your mother. Where do you identify most with? Where do you think you're most like? Maybe it's a little bit of both, but tell me, where does this entrepreneurial spirit come from? Or, what do you?
I think it's like, I would say it's definitely, it's in my blood for sure. Just because, my dad, I'm very similar in different ways to both of my parents. The older I get, the more like my dad I realize I am. But he never finished high school. They immigrated from India when he was 18 years old. But he never finished high school in India because he was the oldest son. He had to work and all that kind of stuff. So when he moved here, like he couldn't get like just a job and do well, basically, right? So going the business side was like the biggest upside way he could do. And so, that's kind of where, I always draw inspiration because for me, like, growing up, I saw him work, 12, 18-hour days when I was like super young, working in the business. And then, he had other businesses even before I was born and stuff like that too. And for me, that's kind of where I feel like I got that from. And I actually talked to, my college roommate the same way. And I was like, if I even worked like 50% as hard as my dad did, I would be like way more successful than I am right now. So,
well, I mean, let's talk about some of the success. And by the way, that's a pretty cool thread to draw there. I mean, you pick up the work ethic, you see what your dad was able to accomplish, the education, and that's why parents push education so hard when you think about it. It's because you could be, if you have the education, you could be a business owner, but it's not a forced route. So now you have multiple options.
For sure. My dad it was huge for my dad. He was always like, you need to do this so you don't have to work as hard as I had to do. Right. He's like, I didn't have a choice. Like you can have a choice on how hard you want to work and what you want to do. So.
Right. And I'm curious, we'll get into family in a little bit there, because I know I've just doing my research on you, I see you're a big family guy. 2 girls, I think, from what I noticed.
Yep,
okay. Yeah. So we'll jump into that in a little bit, but I'm sure that's also part of the enjoyment of being able to independent business owner, run your practice, be able to spend time with them. But I will say, if anybody's going to do their research and you look up Enamel, there's 6 practices now, right? Is that right? So you're not giving yourself a lot of credit because you're saying you're not working that hard, but you guys got 6 practices now, and since 2016, it sounds like, right? So talk to us about this vision, how this started, and why you went from 1 to 2.
Right. So when we started our first practice, we basically did like everything everyone told us not to do. We went into Austin, which I actually think this is not true, but everyone is always like, Austin is so saturated. Austin is so saturated. There's like a million dentists there. Like you can't do anything there. My partner, like since we were in dental school, always said, I'm living in Austin. It's the greatest city in the world. And my wife I grew up in Dallas. I worked in Dallas for a year. She did not like living in Dallas. So she wanted to live in Austin. So it was natural. Like we bounced over to Austin. So, we opened a practice there. I didn't have another job and my partner didn't either. We both went in full-time scratch start, like 0 patients. And we did a partnership, right? So like, those are all like 3 things that people like always try to wave you off from. But, I always like, I've never
partnership, scratch office, don't go to Austin. Yeah. You're like, no, we're going to do all 3 of those things. So
yeah. Well, we were dumb. Like, don't get me wrong. Like I would not recommend doing all those things to anybody. But it was one of those things where we worked at, looking back on it, for my first job was fantastic. Like auction was great. But, when you come out of school, like you just look at the negatives of like what you think other people's jobs are like, and you look at yours and you're like, oh, this isn't good at all. But I learned so much from that first job. And I'm like eternally grateful to my bosses and stuff like that at, where I was at for that. But, we would always, me and my partner call each other, complain about it and be like, man, we could do this on our own. This is super easy, like whatever. And then, obviously it was not as easy as we made it out to be in our heads. But, for us, we opened the practice. There was 2 of us. So we always naturally like, well, we got to do it too. Cause like, there's no way this place is going to be busy enough for both of us to be here all the time and actually make this living sense that we need to make. Right. So naturally, we were always looking for a second location. We had looked and we actually almost got pretty far down the line in an acquisition as our first practice, but the bank wouldn't finance it. It still doesn't make sense to me because it was like a $1.3 million office and they said 2 dentists couldn't work there. I don't really understand that logic, but whatever. So, naturally they gave us, a blank check to do a brand new office with nothing.
Of course.
But,
with no patient base.
I'm sorry?
With no patient base, but it was a blessing in disguise, probably.
Yeah, that makes sense, right? But, so the vision was always to do 2. Now, granted, it was, we got extremely lucky with our first location because there was like a small DSO that dropped out of the spot and the landlord was just like, we need somebody as soon as possible. Right. And we just like, my partner was in Austin and he went to go look at it. It's like, dude, this is the one. And then we're like, I didn't even see it in person. I'm like, he FaceTimed me. I'm like, okay, let's do it. Because honestly, locations like that for us we're just like two dudes with like extremely negative net worth. You know, there's not an appealing thing for a landlord to give somebody, right? Like, especially if it's a really, really great location. And so we got lucky there. The second one was tough because now not only were we two negative net worth individuals to start out with, now I got a gigantic practice loan and a lease as well.
Right.
So, you know, from a financial standpoint, you know, I could give a personal guarantee and it's pretty much meaningless at that point. You know,
you're like, I'll sign away, no problem.
Yeah, whatever. But, you know, not appealing to a landlord when you have, you know, people with, like, we had groups that are signing 2-3 leases at a time that we just couldn't do. Right. So
well, Hardik, I'm sorry,
right?
But how quick, I guess, what was the time frame from practice 1 to practice 2?
2 years.
Okay.
Right. So,
but you always had it in mind that, like, when you opened practice 1, you guys knew you were going to have to probably open the second practice. Okay.
Yeah. We just saw realistically, like, dude, we just have to do this to support ourselves, you know, in a way that we want to. So it took us about a year and a half to find a second location, get the lease done. You know, we got and lost so many different locations. And, you know, it took about 2 years to open it up. And what's crazy is, like, by the time year 2 rolled around, it was the opposite situation where I'm like, that first office was so busy, we couldn't leave it. Right. Because, like, we're jam packed for 2 providers full, you know? So, we were blessed that, you know, one of my dental school classmates actually had texted me, is like, hey, do you know anyone looking for a job or looking to hire anybody in Austin? I'm like, well, actually, you know, we have an office opening. And so, you know, we ended up bringing her on as a partner in that office. And, you know, that's kind of how that went. So we've been super, super lucky.
Yeah, and 4 more later, right? So it's been a good growth model. What would you say is the most important lesson you guys learned from practice 1 to getting into practice number 2? Or lesson.
So I would say, like, you know, the biggest thing I learned from 1 to 2 is, like, I was too involved in literally every single thing that happened in the office or in the practice, right? Between me and my partner, we had our hands in every little thing, every interaction, all that kind of stuff, to, you know, micromanaging pretty much, right? And we were able to push, and I think you could do that in a single office. Like, it's exhausting, but, like, you know, we were able to push that off because we were doing that. But going from 1 to 2, where me and him are still practicing full time in the other office, I don't have my hands at all in this other office. You're relying on your team, whatever systems you may have built and all that kind of stuff to work well. And, you know, we didn't really have proper systems, right? We had us making sure the wheels were turning, right? Which is not like scalable, right?
Right.
So that was the biggest thing. I was like, hey, it forced us to take a step back and be like, okay, what do we need to do to make sure this can run without us doing? And honestly, it took us 3 more years to figure that out, you know, and we're still working on it. But, you know, that has been and continues to be the biggest challenge for sure.
Right. I think when you're growing a business model, whatever business, you got to take a second to be a little bit introspective.
Yeah.
Right. And say, like, where are we just not doing well here? Because we have blind spots. We're just used to growing. So you guys grew from 2 to 6, right? So tell us about what has been the motivation behind continuing to open offices, partners, et cetera.
Right. So, you know, whenever we shifted from 1 to 2 and it's like, oh, this could work reasonably well. And they're like, okay, well, like, why not do 3? Why not do more? I think the vision behind what I think about now and what we thought about then was, you know, when I think about myself as I'm 8 years out of school, but, like, as a young dentist, when I was, like, out of school, first year out, second year out, third year out, you know, the opportunities that were presented to me weren't necessarily, like, great. Like, they would have been fine jobs, but, like, they weren't, like, I wasn't given the opportunity to practice the way I knew was, like, what I thought was the right way to practice, and, you know, go to a place where I can be really proud of the work that I do and me not have to do it myself completely, you know?
Right.
And so, you know, that's one thing that we saw that kind of pushed us to open our first office. But also now like it became like a thing where like, hey, I want to provide opportunities to great dentists and young dentists that may not get the same thing somewhere else at, some bigger groups or wherever, to practice like really good, high quality dentistry while still like learning a lot, growing a lot as a person and things like that. And on the team, outside of even the dentist part, where, I wanted to, our offices to be a place where people like actually enjoy to come, right? Because I've worked awesome, amazing people in other places that were just like not happy to be in the place they are, even though every single team member is pretty much like a badass, right? Like you have everyone really, really good, but just the environment is not conducive for happiness, right? Or like at least contentment. And so that's kind of like, like that's kind of like the vision that we want, and like not perfect at all. Even to this day, we still could be better at doing some of those things, right? But I think we're getting closer every day.
Well, when I look at, talk a little bit about Enamel, I want you to expand on this, but through your website, the technology is cool. You got TVs on the ceilings. You got different. Each office seems to have its own unique environment.
For sure.
And this is coming from a guy in Detroit. Like, I'm not in the offices, but I'm just looking at what you guys provide. So you're looking not only to provide, if I'm saying this correctly, and I want you to expand on this, a unique experience for your patient base, but also for the dentists that you guys are hiring and your staff. Like, this is a different office altogether. So is that kind of the vision to what you guys have produced, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we always wanted to be a reflection of who we are, right? Like ultimately, and like, I'm a gigantic nerd. So that's why have all this technology and like, TV and lights, that kind of stuff. So like, that's where that comes from. And, each office, like also like, the first office was just me and Dr. Patel goofing around, and like, we were like, dude, they have lime green chairs. We got to get lime green chairs. And then after that, each office is kind of an evolution based off like things that we learned that worked well, didn't work well. Also, we have a little bit more money than we did when we first started.
For sure. You don't have to buy the used lime green chair anymore, right?
Yeah. First office, I did all the IT myself. Me and my father-in-law ran all the wires in the walls, and I set up all the computer. I was crimping Cat 5 cables in my living room, like the day before we were supposed to open, and all that kind of stuff. Right? So now you have actual professionals doing it, which is I would highly recommend not doing it yourself if you don't know what you're doing. But each office has been an evolution each time, and it's also a reflection of the provider that we were planning to put into that office, right? So the second office is very much a reflection of Dr. Chow, and like has gotten changed over time to kind of fit the kind of aesthetic and look that she likes. The third office is, again, Dr. Wiley was our partner from day one at that office. And it's very much a reflection of like her aesthetic and like kind of what she likes. And, each one has been kind of an evolution, after that. So it's been cool to see, like, even though you have kind of the same people designing it, they all kind of are sort of distinctly different in their own way.
Right. I love it. I mean, if you go to enameldentistry.com, we'll put it in the show notes, but it's pretty cool just to get the virtual tour. And speaking of virtual, talk to me about virtual consultations. How does that work in dentistry? Is that like a popular feature for you guys?
Yeah. So we don't do much live virtual consultations, to be totally honest. And it's my partner, Dr. Patel, who does most of them. But it's almost like a really guaranteed lead generator, right? Like someone fills out like a virtual consult. They talk about like, hey, I have these issues. This is kind of what my concerns are. And then we'll contact them, like via phone, email, whatever, be like, hey, they'll send pictures and stuff. I'm like, hey, this is what it looks like it could be. This is kind of what it could look like the treatment wise. You have like a range of costs that it could look like for you. We'd love to see you in one of our offices to get an idea of what we need to do, and let's move forward with treatment, right?
Okay.
And so it's pretty cool because like ultimately, like someone that comes into your office from those virtual consults, your treatment acceptance is going to be like 90%, right? Because they already kind of know what they need, and you have sort of an idea, and they have a ballpark idea of cost, right? So the two big things, the unknown and the cost, and they're coming in, that's going to be like a your treatment acceptance on that patient will be fantastic, right?
Right.
And it's a nice thing, right? Because like sometimes like people who are like have a lot of anxiety are afraid to come to the dentist. This is like a low risk thing for them to do. Like, I'm afraid to even talk to somebody about this. Let me just like shoot this thing out, and like if they respond, great. If they don't, great. Or if they do, I get some information. I can decide what I want to do. But a little bit of that fear hopefully is gone for coming in. It's
a great cause. It's just another prong for what you guys are doing, another way to reach out to your patient base. Mm-hmm. Everything from your environment to how you're reaching out is very unique, and I love it. In fact, on your website, our unique approach to dental care, right? So it's very cool. Tell me about what that was. We were doing some research. What is Enamel Radio?
Oh, so Enamel Radio was an idea from one of our old partners, but we have an awesome guy, DJ Robert Michael, but he does a lot of our photography, videography, and stuff like that too. So he's a DJ, and he puts together little mixes that we play in the office, right? So
okay.
And we get requests from either team members, dentists, even patients about like, hey, it would be cool if you guys did like this kind of a mix, or he did like one for the Super Bowl. He did like a Super Bowl like mix where it's like a bunch of songs like from artists or from the Super Bowl and stuff like that. So it's nice, honestly, because like I remember at our first office, what music we played in the office was such like freaking like controversy for everybody that it's like, hey, this is what we're playing. Like, and he does a really good job. Like it's like, I mean, by this point we've been doing it for over a year. So he does a few mixes a month. So now we got like 60, 70 mixes. So you got like such a big variety of music that kind of blends in together and stuff like that. And so it's super cool. And then, a lot of our patients are like, dude, what's the music that you're playing? And so we're able to like, and then we're like, okay, people are asking us enough where, we give them a place where they can listen to it too. So it's kind of cool.
That is cool. I'm like, man, these guys got their own radio station going on too. So I love it. All right. So as you guys are thinking, for what's next for you guys, is it how to get from 6 to 12, or just when the right partner comes and the right opportunity, you'll think about going from 6 to 7?
Yeah. So, I mean, we obviously we plan for future growth for sure. But like I said, like, I feel like it's always market driven, we've never been like, the only time we put a number on it was like, well, we got to do 2. Right. After that, it was just like, hey, what opportunities are presented to us, and what are ones that we know we can't lose? You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to go into something that like could work, could not, like, even though we have 6 practices, I feel like we're still really young, right? Yeah. As a company, right? Like our newest office is less than 6 months old. 3 of our offices are less than a year and a half old, right?
Okay.
And so, we're still really new, we're still growing and stuff like that. So for us, it's like, hey, what opportunities present itself that we know, like, it's going to be hard to screw this up, right? Like, well,
it's not, don't go to Austin, scratch off. You don't have to take that type of risk anymore.
Exactly. Right. So we have a little bit of leverage, like, just because of now that we have some scale. Yeah. But at the same time, like, we don't want to get like a lot of like heartburn while we're trying to grow and stuff like that. So we do have some future growth planned. The crazy part, like, I feel like in Austin, those opportunities, when I talk about opportunities, I talk about like, retail spots, because we're pretty much mostly doing de novos, unless if the right acquisition, appears itself to us. But those kind of locations, we're signing leases that were 2 years out, 3 years out, so, that's a part that's like exciting, but also like, as a very impatient human being, it's all really tough to wait 2 years for something to happen. But like, that's a reality of real estate here in Austin, is like the stuff that a lot of stuff you can get today. Like, if I'm like, if it was me 6 years ago, we got lucky with our first location, right? Like, that's the only reason we were able to get that location that good. But if I'm looking, like, if I was like, hey, I'm moving to Austin, I want to open my own office like in the next 6 months, it's hard to find a spot that with favorable demographics and that, like, a good spot. You can be pretty okay, and I think, again, as a single practitioner, you can like push it to make it really good. But for us, like, I'm looking for every advantage that we can get too. So, that's why future growth is definitely in the plans. Just kind of depends on what opportunity presents itself.
For sure. And
as long as we have awesome dentists to work with, that's the main thing.
Right. Yeah. And dentists, there's no shortage of dentists these days. Well, maybe dental assistants. I know we need more dental assistants. So tie this all together. I mean, like I said, just looking you up and your profile, you seem to be a really big family guy. Mm-hmm. So you're also, I'm assuming, a pretty busy business guy. So how are you tying together family and business? And tell us a little about your philosophy there.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like that's been like a big struggle, right? Like, it's like, we started this, I was married, didn't have any kids or anything like that. That was easy, right? Yeah. But once you get kids in the picture, like, your priorities change definitely a lot, right? Like, and doing that kind of wire balancing act is really, really tough. And like, I'm blessed that I have like such an amazing wife who is incredibly patient with me.
make sure you plug this part send her this part of the podcast. Like,
she's the best. She's amazing, and she's able to kind of help a lot with that stuff, because you never know when I'm going to have to take a phone call at like 8:30 in the morning and be on the phone for an hour and a half, right? It happens way less than it used to, for sure. But a lot of it was just like me personally making sure I draw boundaries for myself. Like disconnecting from my phone was the biggest thing, right? Like, I go home. And like, I'm working, 7 to 5, 7 to 6 ish, usually. Yeah. I come home, you got an hour to 2 hours with the kids, and it's really important time. So I was like, try to put my phone like off to the side. So I don't even look at it until like they go to bed. Right. And so that's been like the biggest thing, is like making sure we do that and just taking time to appreciate it. Right. Because like, you can get lost in the business and like, the ups and downs. There's always fires to put out, but like, it gives you a good perspective to be with like your kids and your family and stuff like that. And like, honestly, number one, keeps you motivated, but also like, things aren't really that bad, right? They're still family, they're still around. Like, it's pretty good.
Right. That's true. The business can recover. Family, we got to pay attention.
I've always said, like, patients have seen us grow, right? Like, patients that I've started out with when we opened our office. And they're like, man, you guys are growing so much. Like, that's crazy. How do you do it? And my philosophy has always been like, if this all just falls apart and goes up in flames, my worst case scenario is really not that bad, right? I'll be, there's a psychological damage aside. I got not great for a finance guy to hear, but I'll declare bankruptcy and I'll have a lot of random weird debt and stuff, but I can still go get a job and make really good money as an associate, right? So like, I don't have much to lose.
Right. You played out the worst case, right? It's like, this could still work. Yeah. No, well, I mean, as a business owner, you got to understand it. And then that helps you kind of move forward, honestly. Yeah. And, I think about when you have younger kids and it's like, you're working so hard to try to spend more time as you're growing. Do you ever see yourself, you don't have to paint this picture too detailed today, but do you ever see yourself as high-level CEO part of Enamel Dentistry, or do you always like working with the patients, being in the nitty-gritty?
Well, honestly, like we are sort of like, we started that transition probably 6 months ago. In out of, well, like almost a year and a half ago, transitioning out of full-time practice, where we brought in an associate at our first office, and then me and my partner went part-time. So we would work week on, week off, like clinically. Right. And so naturally, like, and then the business demanded it, right? Like ultimately, like, and that's where it's like we are very involved in it, right? So because of our roles and how involved we are in it, the business demanded that, hey, like, as much as we love seeing patients all the time, like what was better for our patients was for us to take a step back from clinical practice, right?
That's fair.
And so that was about a year and a half, almost 2 years ago. And then sort of being out of full-time clinical practice starting 6 months ago. Now we're still in and out just because we fill in for docs that want to take, they're either off or out or on vacation, or, if we, have a change in provider or something like that, then we're back in the office. But for the most part, now outside of those situations, we're pretty much like, there for support for our docs. And then, building the business and developing the business from, so many different pieces of it. Right. So.
Right. Absolutely. Well, yeah, there's the business side, the dental side, this keeps going. Yep. Any, last words you want to share with our listeners as we have an audience of graduating dentists, practice owners, right, all across the board from the spectrum. But what were maybe some key pieces as you were growing your business that, you'd like to maybe share with the group, and some one-liners, right? That you can give them. Hey, look out for this. Don't open a scratch. No, I'm just joking. Scratch offices can work for sure.
If you want to do it, don't listen to anybody. Just do what you want.
There you go.
Results may vary, but you'll be happier if you do what you want, right? So, big thing is like the thing that we learned like over time was like, hey, establish your mission, establish your vision, establish your core values. Like when you do it, talk about it all the time and use those things to guide every single thing that you do in the office and the business, right? The way you coach, the way you talk to patients, the way you hire and fire, like that. You have to have a framework for that. Mm-hmm. And that makes your life way easier, right? Because it's not enough to be like, just be good, right? Like that's you can't coach anyone off that. You can't like teach anybody from that. Like you have to establish what you're about and then like put that into writing and put that into words and values and use that as a tool and use that as like your guiding light to do whatever you want. Right. And like, we go to these, like, there's DEO, other organizations that are really awesome. And a lot of the conversation is about that kind of stuff. And I think if you have a good foundation of values that you work from, then everything else falls into place much easier. Right. It's not easy by any means, but when you have a framework to work off of, it's a lot easier to do things. Right.
Right. That makes sense. That's really good, solid advice as you're looking to grow. Before you even look for that first practice, kind of write down what you're all about.
Yeah, exactly. Because I honestly, like, we thought it was kind of stupid. Like, why do I need this? Like, this is kind of dumb. Like, I'm just going to do good work and do a good job, but that's not enough, right?
Well, you have so many decisions you're making. It helps filter the decision-making process. Like, is this outside of our core value or what our mission was? If it is, then it's a pretty easy it's a no. We're not moving in that direction, right? So that is really solid advice.
Right. You might have a team member that's incredible, right? Like really good at what they do, but they're not a core value fit. Then it's not a good fit for you and your company or your office.
Right. It's probably not a good fit for them either, right? They're not going to excel at what they're doing, right?
For sure.
So, well, Hardik, thank you for jumping on and giving us the quick run through Enamel Dentistry and yourself, and appreciate you sharing. As you're continuing to grow, I'm sure we could probably just have another podcast solely designed on how did you think about designing your office, right? We could dial in some of these details, but so we'd love to have you back on someday, and we appreciate your time. Kind of give you the last word to the podcast listeners.
Well, thank you guys for listening to me talk. Most people just ignore me, so this is fantastic. You have to listen to me to do it, so that's awesome. But always keep working, right? Like that's the only thing you can do. If it's hard, that means you're probably on the right track. Because I've always firmly felt that if it was easy, then everybody would do it, right? So. Mm-hmm.
Hardik, could they reach out to you through what resource would be the best way for them if they had questions from this podcast, wanted to have you learn a little bit more?
Message me on Instagram. That's the easiest way to get a hold of me. Emails, I forget. Instagram is, unfortunately, that's like, I'm on it a little bit too much. So
yeah, that's fine.
Call me, message me on Instagram. That's probably the best way.
I will put your Instagram handle in our show notes, so you guys will be able to click that. So that wraps up today's episode. Dr. Hardik Chodavadia, thank you so much, from Austin, Texas, enameldentistry.com. Check him out on Instagram is it at Harcho? Harcho. Yes, sir. All right. And for the Bridge Dental podcast listeners, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.